For 4,500 years it sat in the dark. A stack of papyrus, rolled carefully, sealed inside a cave cut into a limestone cliff beside the Red Sea, a cave that had been closed deliberately by the people who used it. They stacked stones across the entrance. They walked away. And the desert did the rest. The heat, the dryness, the silence. For 45 centuries, no one came. Then, in 2013, a team of French and Egyptian archaeologists working in a remote coastal site called Wadi al-Jarf pushed open a sealed chamber and found it, intact, extraordinary. The oldest personal diary ever discovered anywhere on Earth. Not the words of a pharaoh, not the proclamations of a priest, not a hymn to the gods or a record of battles won. A working man's journal, a foreman's log, a man who got up every morning before dawn, walked to the Nile, crossed the river with a crew of workers and a load of limestone, and then, at the end of his day, picked up his stylus and wrote it all down. His name was Mera, and tonight you and I are going to read his diary together. Come in. Sit down. Balaam is already stretched out by the fire. She found the warmest spot, as she always does. Clever girl. She had a long afternoon chasing shadows in the garden, and now she is completely, utterly at peace. Her paws twitch sometimes when she sleeps. I like to think she's still running in her dreams, but slower now, slower, the way dreams move. You look tired. Good, that means tonight's story will do what it is supposed to do. Before we begin, I want to say something. Something I find myself returning to again and again, the older I get. We imagine the ancient world as remote, alien, a place populated by people who thought in fundamentally different ways, who worshipped animal-headed gods, who saw the flooding of a river as divine breath, who built monuments so large and so precise that even today, with all our tools and computers and cranes, we struggle to fully explain them. And yes, some of that strangeness is real. The ancient Egyptians did inhabit a world of belief and symbol that is genuinely foreign to us. Their universe was alive in ways ours is not. The sun was not a star. It was a god, sailing across the sky each day and descending each night into the underworld, battling chaos, emerging again each dawn in triumph. That is a very different way of being alive. And yet, when you read Mera's diary, this real man, this working man, this foreman with 200 workers under his care, something unexpected happens. He sounds familiar. He worries about whether the wind will be good enough for the crossing. He notes when a supply delivery was late. He records with quiet satisfaction when his crew completed a task ahead of schedule. He mentions a colleague by name, someone he works with regularly, someone he seems to trust. He is doing his job carefully, conscientiously, day after day. He is not a legend. He is not a myth. He is a man, tired at the end of a long day, sitting down to write, wanting the record to be correct. That is the true treasure of archaeology, not gold, not jewels, not the glittering contents of royal tombs. This, a voice, reaching across 45 centuries of silence, saying quietly and without drama, I was here, I worked, I lived. This is what I did today. Let me tell you his story properly. Let your body settle. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day begin to loosen its hold. The year is approximately 2560 before the Common Era. In other parts of the world, civilizations are just beginning to stir. In what will one day become Greece, people are still living in small farming communities. In Mesopotamia, the great cities of Ur and Uruk are flourishing, yes, but Egypt at this moment is something special, something almost impossible. Egypt is the most organized, most powerful, most administratively sophisticated civilization on Earth. The Nile defines everything. It runs south to north, as it always has, as it always will, carrying dark, rich silt down from the mountains of East Africa, depositing it across the floodplain each summer, feeding a nation of perhaps 2 million people with a reliability that no other river on earth can match. The Egyptians called this dark soil Kemet, the black land. It was life. Everything beyond it was Deshret, the red land. Desert, death. Between the black and the red, an entire civilization had grown. Cities, temples, schools for scribes, granaries stocked to feed armies of workers. A bureaucracy, yes, already, 4,500 years ago. A bureaucracy of breathtaking complexity. And on the plateau at Giza, just west of the great river, just at the edge of the desert, something was being built that would outlast everything around it. The Great Pyramid of Khufu. Now, I need you to set aside something. An image. You have probably seen it in films, in paintings, in the pages of history books. The image of slaves, thousands of them, emaciated, beaten, driven under a merciless sun by overseers with whips, dragging enormous stones across the sand. It is a powerful image. It has been repeated so often that it feels like fact. It is not fact. We know this now, with certainty, with evidence, with the testimony of people who were actually there, because of Merer, because of his diary, because of the papyri found at Wadi al-Jarf and at Giza itself. The men who built the Great Pyramid were not slaves. They were workers, skilled, organized, paid workers. They received wages in the form of bread, beer, dried fish, linen, cloth, and occasionally meat, a luxury that marked special occasions or particularly hard stints of labor. They worked in rotating shifts, so that no crew was pushed beyond endurance. They were housed in proper workers' villages near the site, villages with bakeries, breweries, medical facilities. When they were injured, they received care. When they died, and some did, the work was dangerous. They were buried with respect, with grave goods, with the rites that would allow them safe passage into the afterlife. This is not speculation. The workers' village at Giza has been excavated. The bakeries are there, the medical tools are there, the graves are there, and they are not the graves of people treated as livestock. The pyramid was not built by fear. It was built by organization, by pride, by a system so carefully designed and so efficiently run that it managed to lift 2 million stone blocks, some weighing up to 80 tons, into a structure that is still standing, still nearly intact, 4,500 years later. And at the heart of that system were men like Merer, mid-level managers, foremen, overseers, the people who actually made things happen, Not the pharaoh giving orders from his palace, not the grand vizier reviewing plans, but the man on the riverbank at dawn, counting his crew, checking his boats, watching the sky for wind. Breathe slowly now, in and out. Let the story carry you. We do not know everything about Merer. His diary covers only about 3 months of his working life, and it focuses almost entirely on logistics, the daily movements of his crew, the loads they transported, the conditions they worked in. But from those pages, a portrait emerges. His title was something like SMSW in ancient Egyptian, a word that translates roughly as inspector or senior official or overseer. He occupied a middle rank in the vast administrative structure of the pyramid project. Not a laborer, not a royal official, somewhere in between. A man with real responsibility and real authority, accountable upward and downward at once. He commanded a file, the Egyptian word for a division or crew of workers. His file consisted of approximately 200 men. They had a name. Scholars translate it as the upper crew, though the exact meaning is debated. What matters is that they were a unit, a team with an identity, a roster, a chain of command. Their task, the task recorded in Merer's diary, was a specific and vital one: to transport white limestone casing stones from the quarry at Tura, on the east bank of the Nile, south of Giza, across the river to the construction site. These casing stones were not the massive inner blocks of the pyramid's core. They were the smooth, brilliant white limestone that covered the outside of the pyramid, the facing that made it gleam in the desert sun like a polished jewel. The outer skin, the finish. Moving them required boats, big flat-bottomed cargo boats loaded at the quarry dock, steered across the current, unloaded at a specially constructed harbor called the Rocher Khufu, the entrance basin of the Khufu complex, and then transferred to sledges and ramps for the final journey up to the plateau. Merer's diary describes this journey again and again with the slightly hypnotic rhythm of repeated labor. We departed Tura with a full load. Wind from the north favorable. We reached the Rocher Khufu by midday, unloaded, departed the following morning. We departed Tura, wind light but sufficient. We moored overnight at the basin, unloaded the following day. We departed Tura, wind strong. We made excellent time. The crew performed well, day after day, crossing after crossing. It has a quality, reading it, that is almost meditative. The same movements repeated, the same river, the same stones, the same crew, the same careful notation at the end of each working period. There is something deeply human about it, the way repetitive, meaningful work done with care and intention, creates its own kind of rhythm, its own kind of peace. Merer was not building a monument in his mind each day. He was just crossing the river, loading the boats, counting his men, getting the stones where they needed to go, and yet, what he was part of, what those stones would become. Now let your eyes grow heavy, let the fire's warmth reach you wherever you are. There is one detail in Merer's diary that caused particular excitement among historians when the papyri were first studied. a detail that connects this ordinary foreman's logbook to the very highest levels of Egyptian power. Mera mentions in his record receiving instructions from an official named Ankhaf. Ankhaf, that name to an Egyptologist, is electric. Ankhaf was not a minor bureaucrat, he was not a regional administrator. Ankhaf was the half-brother of Pharaoh Khufu himself, the pharaoh for whom this entire pyramid was being built. And at the time recorded in Mera's diary, Ankhaf held the position of Vizier, the highest administrative office in the entire kingdom, second only to the pharaoh in power and authority. Mera, a foreman, a mid-level overseer responsible for 200 men and a fleet of cargo boats, was receiving direct instructions from the Vizier of Egypt. Think about what that tells us. It tells us that the construction of the Great Pyramid was not a disorganized mass of labor. It was a project managed from the very top, with lines of authority that ran clearly and consistently from the pharaoh's court down to the men loading boats at the quarry dock. It tells us that someone at the highest level of Egyptian government cared about whether the casing stones arrived on time, in good condition, in sufficient quantity. That the logistics of the build, the mundane, daily logistics of boats and stones and river crossings were important enough to require the attention of the Vizier himself. It tells us, in short, that this was a serious operation, seriously planned, seriously managed, seriously staffed with people who took their work seriously. And it tells us one thing more, something quieter but perhaps more moving. It tells us that Mera mattered. He was not invisible. He was not nameless. He was a man whose work was noticed, whose reports were received, whose crew's performance was tracked and valued. He had a place in the world, he had a role, and he fulfilled it day after day with what his diary reveals, in its very plainness, its very lack of drama, to be a deep and steady professional pride. Let your breathing find its own slow rhythm now. The story is winding gently towards sleep. I want you to imagine something, not the pyramid, not the pharaoh, not the grand sweep of ancient civilization, just Mera. On an ordinary morning, he wakes before the sun. The air along the Nile at this hour is cool, genuinely cool, even in this desert climate. There is moisture in the air from the river. The stars are still visible, fading slowly in the east. And he knows them. Not as burning balls of gas billions of miles away, but as gods and spirits and markers of time. The star that rises before the flood. The star that tells you the planting season has come. The star that watches over the dead. He eats quickly, bread almost certainly, thick, slightly gritty bread made from emmer wheat, substantial enough to fuel a morning of hard physical work. Beer, the Egyptian staple, which is less like what we think of as beer today, and more like liquid bread. Fermented grain, nutritious and caloric, something between food and drink. Perhaps some dried fish, perhaps an onion. He walks to the riverbank. His crew is gathering, 200 men, some of them young, teenagers really, strong and a little reckless, the way young men always are. Some of them older, experienced, steady, men who have been making this crossing for years, who know every current and every mood of this stretch of the Nile. They nod to Mera as he arrives. he nods back. He knows their names. He knows who works well with whom. He knows who has been unwell this week and who is back to full strength. He is their foreman. He is responsible for them. That responsibility is not abstract. It is these faces, these bodies, this crew. The boats are ready, or nearly so. The limestone blocks from Tura are already loaded, pale, almost white in the grey pre-dawn light. Casing stones, each one will one day sit on the outer surface of the pyramid, fitted so precisely against its neighbours that you cannot slide a piece of paper between them. But right now they are just weight, just cargo, just something to be moved from one bank to another. Mera checks the wind. This matters enormously. The Nile at this point runs roughly north to south, and the prevailing winds in Egypt blow from the north. A good north wind means a fast, easy crossing. A bad day, calm, or worse. A south wind means harder work, slower progress, a crew that arrives tired. Today, the wind is from the north. Good. He picks up his stylus. He writes the date. He writes the conditions. He writes that the crew departed in good order, that the wind was favorable, that they expect to reach the Roche Khufu before midday. Then he puts the stylus down. He walks to the lead boat. He calls the order to depart, and the crew of the papyri, 200 strong, begins another crossing. The river takes them. The north wind fills the sail. The pale stones ride the water toward the plateau where the pyramid grows day by day, stone by stone, crossing by crossing, toward the sky. The fire is very low now, just embers. Balaam hasn't moved. Let me tell you what happened when Mera's diary reached the world. Before 2013, historians and archaeologists had been debating the construction of the Great Pyramid for decades. The monument itself was obviously there, impossible to miss, impossible to ignore, but the how of it, the human machinery behind the building, was genuinely mysterious. There were clues, of course. There were inscriptions, tomb paintings, the workers' village at Giza with its bakeries and medical facilities. There were graffiti, yes, graffiti, the eternal human impulse, scratched by work gangs onto the stones themselves. One gang had named themselves, with magnificent confidence, Friends of Khufu. Another called themselves Drunkards of Menkaure. But these were fragments, impressions. Mera's diary was something different. It was not an impression. It was not a monument. It was a document, functional, detailed, unglamorous, that described in real time what the work of building a pyramid actually involved. And what it revealed changed the conversation permanently. It confirmed the supply chain, the quarry at Tura, the boats, the harbor at Giza. These had been theorized, but now they were documented by someone who used them every day. It confirmed the administrative structure, the way orders flowed down from the Vizier through layers of officials to men like Mera and his crew. It confirmed, beyond any remaining reasonable doubt, that the builders were not slaves. They were organized workers, operating within a sophisticated system that valued their labor, tracked their performance, and supplied their needs. And it revealed something completely unexpected. The site at Wadi al-Jarf, Where the papyri were found was not just a storage cave, it was a harbor, an ancient Red Sea harbor, the oldest known harbor in the world, in fact. Used to supply the pyramid project with materials from the Sinai Peninsula, particularly copper for the tools that cut the stone. The pyramid was not just fed by the Nile, it was fed by the sea. The scale of the operation. When you see it through Mera's diary, when you begin to understand the geography and the logistics and the sheer organizational will behind it, becomes almost incomprehensible. And yet it was accomplished by human beings, with human hands, one crossing at a time. Pierre Tallet, the French archaeologist who led the Wadi al-Jarf excavation, said that the discovery of the papyri was among the most significant finds in Egyptian archaeology in generations, not because of gold, not because of royal tombs, because of a foreman's diary, because of Mera. There is one more thing I want to say before I let you sleep. I think about why Mera wrote his diary. He was required to, of course. Record keeping was part of his job. The Egyptian bureaucracy depended on documentation. It was how the state tracked its resources, measured its output, planned its supply chains. Mera was an inspector. Inspectors filed reports. But there is something in the texture of those reports, in the careful notation of wind direction, in the specific names of people encountered, in the slight shift of tone when the work has gone particularly well. That suggests something more than mere compliance. Mera wrote because he cared. He cared whether the record was accurate. He cared whether the details were right. He cared enough to note the conditions, to name the people, to describe the days as he had actually experienced them, rather than as abstractions. He was telling the truth about his work, for no audience, for no posterity, simply because that is what the work required. And in doing so, without knowing it, without intending it, he left us a gift that no pharaoh's monument could match. He left us himself. The impulse to record, to document, to say this happened, I was here, I saw this, is not modern. It did not arrive with the printing press, or the notebook, or the internet. It is as old as human consciousness itself. It is scratched into cave walls. It is pressed into clay tablets. It is rolled into papyrus and sealed in caves beside ancient seas. 4,500 years ago, a foreman sat down at the end of his working day and wrote what had happened. Not because anyone would remember, not because anyone would care, just because it was true, and truth deserved to be written down. I think about Mera late at night, not the pyramid, not the pharaoh, not the grand architecture of empire. Mera. A man who got up before dawn, fed his crew, crossed the Nile with a load of pale stone, wrote it down, went to sleep, and did it again the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, for months, for years, for as long as the work required him. There is something in that steady, unremarkable devotion, that showing up, that counting the crew, that checking the wind, that making the crossing, that I find more moving than almost anything else in the ancient world. We remember the pharaohs, we remember their names, their victories, their monuments. We remember the gods they worshipped and the stories told about them. But it was Mera who crossed the river. It was Mera who stood at the bow of his boat in the grey light before sunrise and felt the north wind come up and felt, perhaps, a small quiet lift of the heart. A good day, a fast crossing. The crew would be pleased, the stones would arrive on time, Uncuff would have no complaints. And then, at the end of it, he picked up his stylus and he wrote it down. You carry your own days, your own crossings, your own loads that must be moved from one side to the other before the sun goes down. Some days the wind is with you. Some days it is not. Some days the work is hard and slow, and the current is against you, and you arrive on the far bank exhausted. And some days, if you are lucky, if the wind is right, you make excellent time. And the crew is good, and the stones arrive where they are supposed to be. Those days matter, even if no one writes them down, even if no papyrus survives, even if 45 centuries from now no archaeologist pushes open a sealed cave and finds your words waiting in the dark. You were here, you worked, you lived, that is enough. Sleep now. The river is still tonight. The stars are out over the Nile, the same stars Mera watched from the deck of his boat sailing north in the dark before dawn, carrying the stones that would become one of the wonders of the world. The same stars that are outside your window tonight. Let them watch over you. Good night.